Well, is it truly possible to love everybody? And why do I even want to talk about it? Alright, so it's been several weeks since I've been here for a coffee talk. Actually, it's been several weeks since I've made any coffee at home. The last time I was here on Tuesday, then that following Thursday, I came down with the virus and was sick for about 4 days, and just really didn't feel well. And ever since then, I've been on some level or another recovering and have been slowly but surely getting better, but it just hung around a long time. The tiredness, the fatigue, and the exhaustion that came with it were just been hanging around. So I've been experiencing that for a while. So I am feeling a lot better outside. It's definitely springtime here in Colorado. It's we have a lot of afternoon rains, and we have some beautiful days of sunshine. And just here along the Front Range, where we live, we've gotten, I think, enough drought now enough rain that we're officially no longer in drought. And so we're here, and I haven't, because of the sickness, I really didn't want coffee for a couple of days. And then my sense of taste didn't all the way go away, but it just messed up a little to where coffee was kind of gross. And so I wasn't interested in coffee for a couple more days. And so a couple of days ago, I met with someone, with some of the young guys, and we had coffee, and I was like, okay, it's beginning to taste pretty good again. And then today I made my own pot or my own cup. And William was with me when I started making it, and he came and sat with me in the sink there and watched me make the whole process of making the coffee. And he was quite disappointed when he realized I wasn't making his cup, and so I got his cup out and I made him a cup of coffee as well, and he was drinking it upstairs a few minutes ago. So he was really expecting coffee, because there just hasn't been enough coffee in this house for the last couple of weeks. So today I'm drinking Storyville coffee, and I'm, in my office space, I have the bookshelves off behind me, and I have bookshelves off this side along the wall. I have various bookshelves in other rooms of the house, and I keep having this problem where I run out of space for books. Well, I'm kind of able to deal with it. I'll shift things, I'll reorganize some books, I'll move stuff around, and try to restack them this way and restack them that way. And then I've been trying to be a little bit more aware that if there's a book that I really just don't ever either reference or read, or really ever want to read again, then maybe I don't need to keep it. And so I've been trying to be more aware of the books that I have, and being willing to let go of them if I don't actually reference them. Theologically, I have a bunch of books, and some of them I absolutely love, and then others of them, I have them because I know people value them, and I find them boring. And so I'm like, well, I hardly ever open them and look at them because I find it boring. I find it not helping me. And so why would I keep a book that I won't ever read? And so the other day, there was one that I was finally thinking, well, maybe I'll get rid of it. And so Stacy was like, well, yeah, you should. If you don't read it, you should get rid of it. And so then I'm like, well, but maybe I should read it. So I end up opening it, and it was a volume of Spurgeon's sermons, right? So it's got a whole bunch of different sermons in it, different category that someone had written out his sermons. And so I started reading, and I read one of his sermons and was like, well, I can see why people like it. It just, again, is not something that I will read all the time often, unless I find something in it that really piques my own interest and helps me in my personal understanding and journey with the Lord, then a lot of times a book can be, you know, and a well-written book is also something different. A lot of times, just honestly, books that are written about theology are written in a certain sort of scholarly fashion that are meant to be crammed down someone's throat, not to actually enjoy and read. And so I personally prefer to read the books in my life that were designed to be read, were designed for someone, just a normal guy, to pick it up, to read it, to enjoy it, and to learn something from it. And so I always am so grateful when some theologian will tell his life story and mix into his life story the theological growth and things that he's experiencing and how he's growing, because then I feel like I can walk with him and understand what he's looking at. And whereas if someone just distills theological thoughts, then it can be very hard to follow. And I've been enjoying reading some of the church fathers, and it's sometimes the same, where I think if I only understood what they're dealing with and understood where they are in life and what's happening, I could grasp their arguments so much better. And so for some of them, we can actually go back and see what was happening in the life of the church, see what was going on in their life. We have enough history elsewhere that we can read, and then we can say, and now because of in this scenario, here's what he's writing, and it's helpful. But I just personally find that the human context, I'm a human being looking at other human beings' stories and thoughts and ideas, and I am not a book. I am not some loose arrangement or well-arranged ideas and thoughts. I'm way more than that. I'm a human being. And so I do need to know how thoughts and ideas impact people and where they're coming from. So anyhow, all of this to talk about books. And I think I shared this months ago. We were discussing about different books, and I suddenly was like, where's my book by, and I think I was looking for a Harold Bell Wright book, and I couldn't find it. And I thought, well, I usually keep them by the Ralph Connor books. And so I went looking, and I couldn't find the Ralph Connor books. And I thought, that was a lot of books. Should have been like a big box full. Where are my Harold Bell Wright and Ralph Connor books? And I went and I looked over every shelf I had. I was out in the garage. I was in the attic. I was looking everywhere. I thought, somebody stole my books. I don't know why I thought someone would steal my books, but that was my first thought, which is kind of crazy. I don't think I've ever had anyone steal books from me in my life, but so at the time, Stacy and I looked everywhere, and then we discovered that underneath our own bed in our bedroom, we had a stack of things on both sides, and in the middle stack underneath our bed was one box of books that I had. So I have this box of books here in the office, and I'm trying to incorporate it. And last week, when I was trying to decide whether I feel good enough and am ready enough to actually do a coffee talk, one night I was down here working on the book situation, and I recorded a little short video to talk about my dilemma with my books and things. So I'm going to show you that short little video of me. And incidentally, it was a week ago, and I was actually wearing the same shirt, but I had such a headache that night, and I was not feeling up to par at all. But I was trying to decide whether I'd be able to do a coffee talk the next morning or not. And I didn't get it done then, but I recorded this. So here is me in the middle of the night downstairs in my office trying to solve my book problems. All right. I'm having a serious problem. See, I have a box here that is full of books that I absolutely love. The Man from Glengarry by Ralph Connor. I have some Grace Richmond books here. I have The Sky Pilot by Ralph Connor, Recreation of Brian Kent by Harold Bell Wright, some Little Colonel books, and just a whole lot more in here. And the problem is, I don't have room for them on my bookshelves. But my wife has been telling me for a while that if I would get rid of that, I would have room. And here is the problem. This is difficult. See, I love books and I love coffee, and for whatever reason, all of these boxes that I got from Storyville Coffee. These are all things that I really enjoyed, and so I've been keeping each box. Now, when they sent them to me, at the beginning, each one was pretty unique and special. They had something in them, and then eventually, most recently, they just have coffee in them. But my wife is correct. If I got rid of some of these, I would have a little bit more room on my bookshelves for more books. So I am getting to the point right now where I think potentially I might be willing to get rid of some of these precious boxes and make more room for books on my bookshelf. So I'm actually going through the emotional trauma of removing my favorite Storyville coffee boxes, and I think I'm keeping one of them with all the little letters and stuff that they sent me at different times, and I'm going to get rid of the rest. I still get the coffee, and yeah. So now you see the midnight confessions of an introvert who loves coffee and books. What can I say? So, the good news is that after the trauma of thinking, I thought, I already have a headache, I already feel kind of bad, I might as well go ahead and throw away these boxes. So I did. I got rid of the Storyville boxes that were on my shelf. I did keep one box wherein I put all the different pieces. So they'd send me a bag of coffee in a box, and then they would send something like this along, and they would talk about their philosophy of making coffee and how they want, how they make coffee and all of that stuff. And so I have a box of these. Like this little sign said "Endless Sunset," and on the other side it says "Visit Storyville in Seattle and watch the sunset." And it's true. You can go to Storyville there in Seattle and you can see the sunset. And like here was just a card saying, "Did you know?" and talking about where they source their coffee from. But this one was probably one that at the time had made a big impact on me. It said, "Love everybody, never hurt anybody." And I'm thinking, well, that's great. Like, how do you do that? Like, how do you love everybody? And to be quite honest, because the shop is in Seattle and it's coffee and everything, I wasn't sure what the idea of love everybody means. Like, what are they talking about? Because it said it on all of their, like on their boxes. When they send it, it'll say "Love everybody," and it'll have this little boy flying a toy airplane. And so I personally had a story with the way I discovered the coffee shop when I was out in Seattle back in, I think it was November of 2019, and I had actually written a few sections of script for the movie We Three Kings while I was there at the coffee shop. I had, at the time, I signed up for their email list, and they sent me a free mug, which I should have had down here, but I have a Storyville mug upstairs. And then they had sent me the emails in which they'd offered to send me this coffee, and I thought, for right now, for a little bit of fun over the winter, 2019, 2020 winter, I'll just do it. And so I did. And then they started sending me all of these different pieces, and my wife was laughing at me because their advertising was completely working on me, and then I was collecting the boxes, and which I finally threw away a whole bunch of boxes the other night. And but this one little story, "Love Everybody," that they sent me in one of the boxes. And just to give you an idea, like when I first started getting these, they sent me this. They had let's see if I can find the right one, one of the original things. Yeah, there, this letter. They sent this letter with one of the first boxes. It said, "Dear Genius, may we call you that? Because it's the name we thought of as we imagined this moment. You, with your fresh Storyville coffee, about to make our dream come true. You fought your way through the burnt, old, bitter coffee confusion. Yes, you've paid your dues. And you have arrived, my friend, to brewed bliss. Fresh, deep, full-roasted happiness. Your coffee IQ is off the charts. stay humble, Storyville. So they sent me this genius letter, and I thought it was quite genius, and I did think it was quite, and I think I shared it on an earlier coffee talk. So their advertising is completely working on me. I'm keeping all their boxes and cluttering up my books, and finally this past week, in a time of looking around my office, trying to figure out how I can clean things up, what I can do, and it's interesting. And I'm going to get to this Love Everybody in a minute, but like Stacy had been talking to me, she was reading something, or they were having a conversation somehow, and how when it comes to problem solving, we either throw something at it, that's our automatic operation on how to solve a problem. So we have a problem, well, let's add more of this. That's one way of solving problems. The other way is to say, well, what can we subtract? If we're having this problem, what can we take away? And so I'm in the boat where if I'm having a problem, I say, well, let's add something to it. And so for me, I'm looking at my coffee situation, and I'm trying to figure out how do I solve the problem of my book situation. And so my thought is not remove something from the shelves. My thought is, how can I make more shelves? And so I would just keep adding layers and layers, and eventually I might have to add more shelves. But that was my go-to way of dealing with most problems, is I try to add something to it. If it's not working right, well, let's add something to it. And so like I think of how many times in my life I've been in a situation like, well, we need to start doing this. And if we start doing this, then that will take care of this issue over here, and then pretty soon I'm like, okay, in order to make that happen, we also have to do this. And so I keep adding things and adding things and adding things until something breaks and I can't do it all. And so this idea of subtracting in order to solve problems is kind of scary to me, because I have to take something out of my life. So like for me to take the boxes off the shelf and actually throw them away is subtracting something to solve a problem, which means now that the next time I get a Storyville coffee box, I'm literally going to have to throw the box away unless I figure out some real meaningful reason to keep it. And so that was the decision I was making that night, was I'm getting all these boxes down, I'm getting them on the table, I'm looking at them, I went through them, got out all these papers that were in all the different ones of them, and then I will have space for books. And so now I'm applying the same thing. I'm looking at all my books going, well, there are books here that people have given me, or that I've inherited in some way, or that I've got in a box of other books. And because it's a book, it's very hard for me to get rid of it. But then it can be very difficult for me to find my favorite books, the ones that I actually like to read, the ones that I will read and reread over and over again. And so like right now I have right here on my desk a short stack of theology books that I will actually look at on not each book, but one of these books on a weekly basis, if not several times a week. I'll be accessing them and reading them and looking at them. And then I'm trying to make to where my bookshelves that are over here will actually carry the books that I actually want to open and look at on a regular basis. And then if there are books that I really don't ever look at, but someone told me 20 years ago, this is a good book, you should read it. Well, if I can't read it, then it's not helping me. It doesn't matter how good it looks. And so I'm trying slowly to psych myself up to be one of these problem solvers that solves problems by removing things, subtracting things from the situation. But back to my Love Everybody sign. When I first heard of that, I didn't know, because in the church we have some concerns where we don't always know what we're talking about when we talk about love. See, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. So we understand that when God loves, he can love everybody. He can love the darkness, the people who are lost in the darkness, the people who are broken. He can love all of these people, but he doesn't leave them there. He goes and he injects himself into the situation, and he himself is the light, he is the truth, and he rescues people from the darkness. And this is the problem that we're told about in John 3, after verse 16, where it talks about how the light has come into the world, but the problem is that men love darkness rather than light, and so they don't come to the light. And so, if in the same idea of subtracting things, when I let the light shine into my life, then there are certain things that I no longer need. I say, well, if I'm going to live in the light, I don't need this. I don't need to hide this. And this, I think the last coffee talk I talked about deviousness, devious thoughts. And how easy it is to host thoughts that I shouldn't host. And so we get down to this point where when I think of love, I immediately start throwing up all kinds of guards. And so when I was reading this one where it says love everybody, it was at first I was thinking way up here on this level where I'm thinking, well, theologically, on the level of God loving people, yes, we love everybody on that level. And then I'm thinking through practically and psychologically, and if someone is hurting me, and do I keep loving them? And I'm like, okay, so there's the difference between love and like. And then I have to find a way to be able to say, well, I love you, but I don't like the actions that you're doing because those are sin and they hurt the heart of God. And so I'm trying to figure out all of these complicated ways to think and talk about love. And then that day when I got this paper, I just was kind of abruptly stopped in my tracks and thought, well, this is the simplicity of it, isn't it? So let me just read this to you. Love everybody. It's when Gary turned 30. 150 friends and fans gathered from around the world to celebrate 10,958 good days in a row. When he was born, he arrived 8 weeks early and immediately required major surgery. The doctor delivered the news it would be a miracle if he survived. If that doctor could only see how very alive he is today. When he was 13, so when Gary was 13, this is Gary right here in the corner. When Gary was 13, he overheard a conversation about how sad it was that a friend's new baby had Down syndrome. And Gary Phelps interrupted and said, "Down syndrome is great." And someone asked, "Gary, what does Down syndrome mean?" And Gary answered, "It means you love everybody, and you never ever hurt anybody." Gary is right. He's profoundly right. We agree with Gary that that's why his words of wisdom are displayed in our Storyville shops. He teaches us every day, love everybody. So here's a picture of two people drinking coffee in one of the Storyville coffee shops, and there on the wall it says, "Love everybody, never ever hurt anybody, Gary Phelps." See, when I saw the phrase "love everybody" on the Storyville coffee thing, I was going philosophical with it. I was going theological with it. I was trying to figure out the psychology behind it. I was going all over the place. And I wasn't just stopping and saying, is it right and good to love everybody? Because the simple answer is, we should love everybody. We should love people. And we should be kind to people. When I was sick these last couple of weeks, there were a lot of times when I wasn't loving and kind. I've thought about it a lot of times. You'll when someone, as we age and we get older, if we start losing our capacity, our mental memory and things like that, and you'll see people kind of reverting to their ways of their childhood. And so you'll see some people who will be perennially sweet. They're dying, they're hurting, they're in pain, and they'll be sweet and kind to everybody. And then you'll have others who become selfish and mean and cruel and say nasty things and careless and don't care about people. And so I've often observed that and wondered, how do I have a choice in that? Do I, as a person, get to choose what kind of a person I would be if dementia was setting in? And My trial run at not feeling good and being sick and having headaches in the last couple of weeks, my trial run doesn't bode well for me. And I feel sorry for those who would have to take care of me when I'm getting older based off of how I responded to people around me. I didn't love everybody. I wasn't kind. I was selfish. And I loved myself, and I was in pain, and I didn't like not feeling good, and so I was grumpy. And so I've been thinking about that as I was cleaning out my office space here and trying to make more room for the books that really matter, and thinking about my life and everything that's in it, and am I able to remove things so that it's less distractions around, less complications all around me? And am I able to just be in a simpler place so that when the question comes up about loving somebody, I don't have to immediately go and think of the theological ramifications of what would happen if I loved this person, what if I showed kindness to them, and I just simply went with, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Can I just love people? It's okay. Jesus is the one. If he's loving me through me and he's loving other people, if we need to be changed, then the Spirit of the living God is able to tap on us and say, you're not quite right with me. And God can change that. I don't have to play God in that moment and try to change someone and make them be more lovable or more aligned with my idea of what perfection and love looks like. So I was sick. I'm recovering. I feel a lot better. I'm drinking coffee again. And I'm thinking deep thoughts about loving everybody. Is it possible? Or am I just selfish all the time? Because honestly, I'm pretty selfish. The way I make decisions about books on my bookshelves is kind of selfish. The way I don't ever want to get rid of anything that makes me happy, that's selfishness, and I need to let things go. So that's where I am. And thank you for joining and listening to my ramblings today about books and coffee and loving people. I want to come to a place of simplicity where I can trust God to be God, and I can just love people and allow his love to flow through me. And I still, I'm expected to be able to speak the truth of God's word, to accurately present what he said. But God so loved the world. He loved the hateful, evil world that the Pharisees were living in, where they were living a double standard. He loved the world of the people, all the people that were helping make the horrible wickedness happen down at the Colosseum in Rome. He loved all the slaves who were in bondage. He loved all the slave owners who were in bondage. He loved everybody. And every single one of those people, God's word was going out and calling them to himself. And when they responded and left the darkness and came into his light, he was able to change them by the power of his love. My love personally really doesn't have that changing power that God's love has. But what I've discovered is I don't have enough love to go around anyway, and so if I'm talking about loving everybody, I really do have to have God's love in me to do that. So for what it's worth, those are my thoughts for this week. I'm really glad I can taste the coffee all the way and not just part of it. My sense of taste and smell have pretty much all come back, and I'm feeling better day by day, and I have lots of projects that are piling up that I'm needing to take care of. But I am serious about wanting to be sanctified on some deep level so that when I am in discomfort and not feeling well, that I am kind to the people around me, especially to my wife. Because right now, this past couple of weeks being a test of that, I didn't do so good. I didn't really love everybody like I believe a child of God ought to and can. So, I don't know what else to say today. Blessings. Thank you for joining me. And I will see you next week. And hopefully I'll have a report of something that God is doing. And maybe I'll get to tell you about some new books. Because I do have new books. That's why I need more books space on my bookshelf. Blessings. Talk to you next week.